Did you know that the father of the Big Bang, the man who is the reason we believe that the universe started with a Big Bang, which led to the theory of evolution, which led to all these other scientific theories, was a Catholic priest? It doesn't make any sense, does it? And that's why I'm going to tell you guys right now that this video is about to be the best video, the most important and informative video that's been uploaded onto YouTube. I truly believe that, because I am going to settle. I have something in common with this gentleman here that we're talking about, as far as being a believer of God and science. And so I want to settle the argument of which is it? Is it science or is it God? Let's look into that. So what we're going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be talking to you guys, and we're going to be referencing, addressing, and critiquing modern day fundamental scientific beliefs that form our understanding of the universe and whether we are or are not evolving, where we are going and where we started, along with what the Bible has to say about that. And we're going to start with the science. And the reason why I'm doing this, guys, is because we'll get into the reason why I'm doing this, but all I'm going to say to you right now is that if you're interested in this, if this sounds interesting, if you want to get to the bottom of this, listen, we're going to start with the science. This video isn't going to be for everybody, because listen, my videos are already controversial according to people. I don't think they're controversial. I think I just not a slave to the system. So when I say stuff, people are like, you're trying to be so controversial like a conspiracy theorist. It's like, no. I just don't give a crap what anybody has to say about me other than God. That's the difference. I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm being authentic, okay? But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start with the science to form a fundamental, logical basis and foundation for what we're going to talk about. Because I think it's truly important, especially when we're going to talk about God, that a lot of people, their issues with God is that it's all very spiritual, fantastical, mythical, in the air. So let's start with a foundation that's based on science. Let's critique the science against the science, and then let's take our conclusions from that and talk about God. And then we can see where we end up. Because for me, I relate to this man, and this man's name is Georges Lemaitre. Georges Lemaitre. Before we get into it, guys, just know this is going to be a long one. Buckle up, grab yourself some popcorn, grab yourself some wine, or whatever you want to have, some tea, some snacks, some nothing. Maybe take a break. Maybe pause this video, add it to your watch later, and watch it later, because listen, I'm putting my foot all the way into the gas on this one. And to be completely honest, I don't think people can handle this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because this is the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So let's go. The father of the Big Bang, the man who came to the understanding and who theorized the concept of this Big Bang, Georges. I'm reading right now from the American Museum of Natural History, right? We've got we've got receipts here. We've got research, we've got articles, we've got history, we've got the Bible, we've got it all. So don't worry. This is all, I went out of my way to get this for you guys to form a logical foundation. So here we go. According to the American Museum of Natural History, I'm going to read through it and I'm going to talk it through, because that's the best way for me to do it, guys, because I can explain what they're saying. And one thing I have to say about scientists, as a scientist, we're even going to reference my own scientific research at some point in this video, is there's a tendency that scientists use these big words, and they do it on purpose because they want to be seen to, like, be higher than everybody else. But it's actually quite easy to explain what they're talking about. So I'm going to be the person to translate the science. So here we go. According to the Big Bang Theory, the expansion of the observable universe began with the explosion of a single particle at a definite point in time. So the most important thing to note right now is that according to the Big Bang Theory, there was a specific time and date and whatever we want to call it, time, day, month, year, we could even call it as we call it today, where this event took place. That's very important, because it means that the concept of the Big Bang Theory in and of itself is reliant on the existence of time. We're going to get to why that's important. This starting idea first appeared in scientific form in 1931. So this isn't even 100 years ago since we've been believing in the Big Bang Theory, which we're going to talk about that more. In a paper by Georges Lemaitre, who I want to just point out that his surname means the master. The master. A Belgian cosmologist and Catholic priest. So cosmologist, studies the cosmos, the, universe, etc., and a Catholic priest. Now, again, a lot of people would think that these two things don't work together. I am a believer both in science and God. We're going to talk more about how I relate to somebody else who kind of does a similar thing, because it gets very interesting, because these things shouldn't make sense. And it's interesting that the Big Bang Theory, which a lot of people would see as contradicting the Bible, is the man who constructed that theory is also a Catholic priest, a believer in God. So we'll talk more about that, because that's very fascinating in my opinion. The theory accepted by nearly all astronomers today was a radical departure from scientific orthodoxy in the 1930s. Many astronomers at that time were still uncomfortable with the idea that the universe is expanding. That entire observable universe of galaxies began with a bang seemed preposterous. So basically, the concept that there was a big bang that caused all this expanding of the universe. In fact, further into this article, you're going to see that actually before this man, Georges, before he came along, scientists actually didn't even believe that the universe was static. There wasn't actually proof that the universe was either expanding or otherwise, or vice versa. So that's why a lot of this is very interesting, because the fact that, anyway, we'll talk about it. He then goes on to say he was a devoted teacher who enjoyed the company of his students, but he preferred to work alone. Sounds like me. Lemaitre's religious interests remained as important to him as science throughout his life, and he served as president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences from 1960 until his death in 1966. In 1927, Lemaitre published in Belgium a virtually unnoticed paper that provided a compelling solution to the equations of general relativity for the case of an expanding universe. Basically, he had done research and had provided scientific and mathematical answers to equations, right? Which is important we talk about this, and this is why we're starting with the science, is because science is quantitative, as in 3x equals 12, x equals 4. Like, x can't equal 5, x can't equal, x equals, if 3x equals 12, then x equals 4. Do you guys see what I'm saying? So one of the reasons why science is so important is because it provides, and maths, they are the completely logical understandings that we have as people, and things that cannot be questioned. If you have 2 apples, you only have 2 apples. You can't envision that you have 3 apples. You can tell yourself you do. That's a lie. No, you have 2 apples. You only have 3 apples when you gain a 3rd apple. And I think that's what's the comfortability of logic, especially for me, because I'm a very logical type of person. That's why I very much find science something I really love, because I can understand, and I need for this. Even in school, I was like horrible. Well, I wasn't horrible. I wasn't as good in English, for example, language and literature, as I was in maths and chemistry, because in English it was always like, what is the mood? What is the emotions that the writer is trying to convey? And I'm like, that's such an open-ended question. Like, I like maths where 3x equals 12 and x equals 4. X equals 4. Like, you know what I mean? So that's how I think. Anyway, so the fact that he can provide these answers is important, because these are physical equations that have been accepted as to the general relativity and the expansion of the universe. We're going to get to why this is important, guys. I need you to just ride the wave with me. I know it's a lot of like scientific talk and all of that, but I'm doing this for a reason, because a lot of people, when they talk about this type of stuff, they don't address the logic and the science, and that's why I'm taking the time to do this myself and really get into it. So his solution had in fact already been derived without his knowledge by the Russian Alexander Friedman in 1922. But Friedman was principally interested in the mathematics of a range of idealized solutions, including expanding and contracting universes and did not pursue the possibility that one of them might actually describe the physical universe. So basically, this other scientist had also found the answers to this as well, but because of his limitation of him not believing that it's possible that the universe could be expanding or contracting, he didn't see what he had found, which this is important for me because this is an example of the limitation of the brains of humans alone, because we can sometimes be faced and given the truth in front of our very faces, even mathematically and scientifically, and due to the limitation of our expectation, or rather the boxes in which we think, we are unable to actually receive that information. It actually reminds me also of my actual favorite scientist, George, is it George? Greg Mendel. His surname is Mendel anyway. And the research that this man did, and this is why I love him specifically, he's known as a biologist, but he was actually a mathematician. And basically his research, what he did, he's the reason why we have the understanding of genetics the way that we do today. So prior to his research, which he did with peas, literally peas, the vegetable, showed that when you have two things breeding together, whether this is plants or animals, right, or mammals, whatever, they don't just, the offspring don't just come out as a 50-50, as an average of what you started with, i.e., as a child, as a child, I don't just get born to be the average, like my dad's height and my mum's height added together divided by 2. That's not what my height is going to be. There are other factors at play. There's other things at play. And he was the scientist who discovered that, because interestingly enough, prior to his research, scientists actually believed that that's how it worked. They believed that we all come out pretty much as the average of our parents, which anybody who has siblings knows that's not the case. You and your siblings are not all just these 50-50 versions of your parents. There are different things that happen with that. So I love Gregor Mendel, but now no one understood his research at the time. This is why I'm mentioning him. Nobody understood his research at the time because it was all numbers, because he was a mathematician, and with peas that he did himself. And it was a while, and after he actually died, that scientists had actually understood what the research was. And this is where we get the idea of dominant and recessive alleles and all these types of things. If you're a scientific person, you know what those types of things mean, i.e. certain traits are dominant, other traits are recessive when it comes to breeding. And therefore we won't get into the understanding of all of that, but basically I'm just trying to use that as an example to say that there's a lot of times where the limitation of our understanding as humans prevents us from even understanding the actual science that's before us. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So so he did not pursue the possibility that one of them might actually describe the physical universe. In contrast, Lemaitre attacked the problem of cosmology from a thoroughly physical point of view, which I love because I love physics. Physical chemistry was my favorite subject. My research project was also in physical chemistry. Physical chemistry is the perfect combination for me because it's like, what's physically happening, and how can we quantify what's actually happening? Not what we think is happening, not what we can't see what's happening, but what we can actually quantitatively observe. And he realized that his solution predicted the expansion of the real universe of galaxies that observations were only the beginning to suggest. So he was the one who then saw that, yes, this universe is not expanding, it's static, it is expanding, as opposed to contracting and as opposed to being static. By 1930, other cosmologists, including Eddington, Willem de Sitter, and Einstein, had concluded that the static, non-evolving, so this is non-evolving, static in this case they mean non-evolving as well, models of the universe they had worked on for many years were unsatisfactory. This is one of the issues I have with science, is that a lot of science and a lot of the greatest scientists do all this work for decades and decades and decades, and then are met with the reality that everything they just worked on for the last 30 years was wrong because they didn't know this one thing. So, and Einstein is included in this. Furthermore, Edwin Hubble, using the world's largest telescope at Mount Wilson in California, had shown that the distant galaxies all appeared to be receding from us at speeds proportional to their distances. It was at this point that Lemaitre drew Eddington's attention to his earlier work in which he had derived and explained the relation between the distance and the recession velocity of the galaxies. Now, velocity is obviously like, how do I describe it? It's, velocity is like distance over time, basically. Miles per hour, kilometers per second, that type of thing. That's velocity. It's telling you something, and you can go positively or negatively in velocity, forward or backward, and then there's a time element. Eddington at once called the attention of other cosmologists to Lemaitre, this is 1927 paper, and arranged for the publication of an English translation. Together with Hubble's observations, Lemaitre's paper convinced the majority of astronomers that the universe was indeed expanding, and this revolutionized the study of cosmology. So this whole concept that the universe is expanding was a big thing, basically, is what it's saying. Because scientists, and this is the other thing that people don't understand about science, scientists are always working off the basis of what we've all agreed is what's truly happening. So the reason why this is a big deal is because prior to this, when people weren't believing that the universe was consistently expanding or retracting and that it was static, everything that was being done amongst the science community, for the most part, obviously not all of it, but for the most part, was accepted that the universe was static, right? So this development changes everything. It changes all the calculations. It changes all the understanding, right? A year later, Lemaitre explored the logical consequences of an expanding universe and boldly proposed that it must have originated at a finite point in time, i.e., there was a specific moment to which the universe started to expand. If the universe is expanding, he reasoned it was smaller in the past, and extrapolation back in time should lead to an epoch when all the matter in the universe was packed together in an extremely dense state. This is where I already start to question this as a theory, because he's assuming, and this is what people don't realize about science, and we're going to get more into the assumptions that scientists make that people don't realize, because people think all science is based purely off of numbers, but a lot of science is based off of assumption and approximation, which we're going to talk about that, because part of my own research that I did myself, I had to base my research off of a lot of approximations and assumptions. Even a lot of these equations that scientists use, they'll say, we assume that this equals this based on something, but it's not a quantitative calculated number. It's an assumption, it's an approximation, which is actually quite important if you think about it. So we'll come back to that. But yeah, it comes back to a finite point in time. If the universe is expanding, he reasoned, it was small in the past and extremely dense state. Okay. Appealing to all the matter in the universe, appealing to the new quantum theory of matter, Lemaitre argued that the physical universe was initially a single particle, the primeval atom as he called it, which disintegrated in an explosion, giving rise to space and time and the expansion of the universe that continues to this day. This idea marked the birth of what we now know as Big Bang cosmology. This is fascinating to me. We'll come back to why. It's tempting to think that Lemaitre's deeply held religious beliefs might have led him to the notion of a beginning of time. So you might think that because he's a Catholic priest, his belief like this goes back to specifically the fact that he believes in God and maybe say creation and the creation of the world as documented in Genesis 1 of the Bible. However, after all, the Judeo-Christian tradition had propagated a similar idea for millennia. Yet, Lemaitre clearly insisted that there was neither a connection nor a conflict between his religion and his science. Now, I fundamentally disagree with that completely. I absolutely see a connection, and I'm going to get into that connection later in this video. And that's why I thought it was interesting to even discover that this man was also, like me, a believer in God and science, and that for him, he says he doesn't see a connection. Rather, he kept them entirely separate, which is how a lot of people see things. Can you see as well how in this world we live, this one person's ideologies have perpetrated, is that the word? I don't know. I only got a B in English, guys. I got A's in maths and chemistry at high school. I got B's in English, okay? I don't know. How it infiltrated into society. Because this is a popular belief. that these two things exist separately. And that's actually why I'm making this video, because I'm like, let's actually talk about it. Like, let's see if these two things really genuinely exist separately. So he clearly says that there was neither connection or conflict between his religion and his science. Rather, he kept them entirely separate, treating them as different, parallel interpretations of the world, both of which he believed with personal convictions. So basically, he's saying what a lot of people would say. This is how it comes across to me in modern day language. Well, there's truth and flaws to both of them, and they can both kind of exist because they're both kind of the same language of kind of the same things. That's what people say. I say it in that tone because that's how it sounds in my head, because it's so freaking boring. And as a mathematician, as a scientist, there is no way that we can be satisfied with that, because something has to come on top. 3x has to equal 12. X has to equal 4. So what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Anyway, we'll get to all of that. Indeed, when Pope Pius VII, I believe, referred to the new theory of the origin of the universe as a scientific validation of Catholic faith, Lemaitre was rather alarmed. Delicately, for that was his way, he tried to separate the two. He says, as far as I can see, such a theory remains entirely outside of any metaphysical or religious question. I completely disagree with that. It leaves the materialist free to deny any transcendental being. For the believer, it removes any attempt at familiarity with God. It is consonant with Isaiah speaking of the hidden God, hidden even in the beginning of the universe. That is a very loaded statement. That is a very, very loaded statement. And he's basically trying to, I'm not even say what I think he's trying to do, but I feel like he's basically trying to, I just said I wasn't going to say this and now I'm saying it, but we're saying it. So I basically see that he's basically trying to say, he's trying to make the argument that a lot of people do who are religious, not people who have a relationship with God, not the Bible following, Holy Spirit filled followers of Jesus, but the religious believers in God, which is that you can exist in this world, remains entirely outside of any metaphysical question. It leaves the materialist free to deny any transcendental being. So, like, you cannot believe in God and thrive, but for the believer, it removes any attempt at familiarity with God. It is consonant with Isaiah speaking of the hidden God, hidden even at the beginning of the universe. So I propose that what he's basically trying to say is he doesn't really even himself have any familiarity with God, which you guys will know from my channel, that God is the closest person to me in my life. Like, God is the person I trust the most. God is the most presence I've ever had in my life, like, to this moment. So for me to see something like that from somebody who claims to be a priest, which I just want to go ahead and just quickly dispel and address a theological issue with the idea of priesthood, because the Bible actually says that Jesus is the final priest, and the fact that we who are supposed to be believers of Jesus Christ believe that Jesus is alive, and he's alive, and the fact that he's alive and will be alive forever, and him being our final priest, means we no longer need priests. So the concept of priesthood, and I'm not saying this to say that any priests who are priests are like going to hell or something crazy like that, because I believe God understands that we all don't have all the revelations we need to have, and everything, and even I don't. There's a lot of things I don't understand, truthfully, right? But biblically, you can read it in your own Bibles, says Jesus is the final priest. So priesthood isn't even a thing anymore, because that was just to prove a point, which we'll get into later. So in the latter part of his life, Lemaitre turned his attention to other areas of astronomical research, including pioneering work in electronic computation for astrophysical problems. Astrophysical, in the outer space and whatever, which again is interesting that I did research just by chance. It's not by chance, it's by the Lord, because the research I did, which we'll talk about at some point when it's the right time, was about molecules in outer space. Isn't that crazy? His idea that the universe had an explosive birth was developed much further by other cosmologists, including George Gamow, to become the modern Big Bang Theory. While contemporary views of the early universe differ in many respects from Lemaitre's primordial atom, his work has nevertheless opened the way. Shortly before his death, Lemaitre learned that Arnaud Penzias and Robert Wilson had discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation, the first and still most important observable evidence in support of the Big Bang. Now, we're not going to get in too much into that, because if we get into so much into of every bit, we're going to be here all day. We're already going to be here all day. It's part 1, and we're only at we're already 25 minutes in. So what I wanted to do next is I wanted to address the Big Bang Theory in and of itself. So we understand where it came from. It came from a Catholic priest who was able to confirm and prove that the universe was not static, and it was not also contracting but expanding, and that he believed this goes back to a finite point, a specific point in time. Now, the scientists went off of that and agreed with it because the evidence showed itself by extrapolating backwards. If something is expanding outwards, you would assume that the reverse is that it's going inwards, and then that inward thing, the fact that it's going in a direction, must mean there must be a starting point in the first place. In the same way that if somebody sees you speeding down the motorway or the highway, the fact that they are seeing you at one point at point A at time A and the next point at time B is evidence that there was a time A. Even if they just see you at time B, the fact that you were not at the place or the location of where you were at point B before you got there is evidence that a point A must exist, right? That's basically what they're saying. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Big Bang Theory, how it all started. So now we're looking at a article that is from, what is it from? Space.com, which talks about the 10 easy steps, the Big Bang to now. So how we understand the Big Bang to now, what is a summary of this, and this is what we're going to talk about. So let's start from here. We're going to start from step 1. They do a little introduction, but I don't want to waste you guys' time because, yeah, we're going to be here all day. But this article was written on the 2nd of February, 2022. The Big Bang was not, this is step 1, how it all started. The Big Bang was not an explosion in space, as the theory's name might suggest. Instead, it was the appearance of space everywhere in the universe, researchers have said. According to the Big Bang Theory, the universe was born as a very hot, very dense single point in space. Cosmologists, which our friend Georges Lemaitre would identify as, are unsure what happened before this moment, but with sophisticated space missions, ground-based telescopes, and complicated calculations, scientists have been working to paint a clearer picture of the early universe and its formation. So basically, now with our modern technology, etc., we're trying to go backwards to understand what happened beforehand. Because we know where we're at now, we know what time B is, but we don't know what time A is. So we're trying to use what we know about time B and how we got to time B and the nature of time B to get back to time A, right? A key part of this comes from observations of the cosmic microwave background, which contains the afterglow of light and radiation left over from the Big Bang. So basically the leftover radiation and like just energies. I'm going to try and really simplify this, because otherwise we'll be here all day if I try to explain every single scientific theory that's behind all of this. But the residual, it's almost like if you use an oven, I'll give you guys an example. If you use an oven and you're cooking something, when you turn off the oven doesn't instantly go to 0. The oven still has the residual heat that comes off of it. Obviously in this case the oven is still on and the residual heat is still going and it's still just moving as it is or whatever. Don't think too much into that. But the point of this whatever radiation is there's an event that took place. Actually, it is like the oven situation is perfect. There's an event that took place and we're looking at the residual energies released as a result of that event that we can see to today, and we're using that. That's basically what they're saying. The relic of this Big Bang pervades the universe and is visible to microwave detectors, which allow scientists to piece together clues of the early universe. In 2001, NASA, which again guys, 2001 is only 22 years ago, NASA launched the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe mission to study the conditions as they existed in the early universe by measuring radiation from the cosmic microwave background, among other discoveries. The WMAP was able to determine the age of the universe about 13.7 billion years old. So basically they looked at what was the radiation now, And if this is the amount of radiation now, if we were to go back to a potential starting point, a point A, what would that have been? When would that have been? And it goes back to this velocity thing I was saying to you guys about distance and how velocity is distance over time. It is distance over time. So, which can be positive or negative. That's the important thing. It can be positive or negative. And using that to work out the age of the universe, like how long, this is the distance. The distance in this case would be the length of A to B over time type of thing. So step 2, the universe's first growth spurt, when the universe is very young, something like 100th of a billionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second. It underwent an incredible growth spurt. During this burst of expansion, which is known as inflation, the universe grew exponentially and doubled in size at least 90 times. So again, this concept of just all of a sudden the universe just having all of this growth out of nowhere. The universe was expanding. As it expanded, it got cooler and less dense. This is by David Spergel, a theoretical astrophysicist at Princeton University, who told Space.com, after inflation, the universe continued to grow but at a slower rate. As space expanded, the universe cooled and matter formed. So basically, as all of this continued on, things formed, it cooled, and then the world that we believe in today started to form. Light chemicals, elements, were created within the first 3 minutes of the universe's formation. That's really interesting. That is really interesting because it actually parallels what the Bible says about how God said, let there be light, which we'll come back to all of that in a minute. And that was the first thing that God said. And also science is now saying in the first 3 minutes of the universe's formation that light chemical elements were created within the first 3 minutes. As the universe expanded, temperatures cooled and protons and neutrons collided to make deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen. So, gosh, am I going to start explaining isotopes right now? No, I'm not. What I will say is, if you don't know about protons and neutrons, atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Neutrons have a zero charge. They are neutrally charged. Protons are positively charged, and electrons are negatively charged. Now, we're going to leave it at that because otherwise it's just going to get crazy. Anyways, deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. Now, isotopes usually mean that you have a different number of neutrons but the same number of electrons and protons. So I'm assuming it's a hydrogen that actually has a neutron because hydrogen has no neutrons. Anyway, much of this deuterium combined to make helium for the first 380,000 years after the Big Bang. However, the intense heat from the universe's creation made it essentially too hot for light to shine. I forgot to say this, that hydrogen is the smallest atom. It's made of 1 proton, 1 electron. So that's why I think this saying is an isotope of hydrogen is important, because it means that, because helium, if I'm not mistaken, do I have the periodic table with me right here? I don't think I do. If I'm not mistaken, helium has 2 neutrons. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it does have 2 neutrons. And in case of which it does, it basically means that deuterium would have to be the middle point atom between hydrogen and helium, which I will say this deuterium is not in the periodic table. If you look at the periodic table, you're going to see hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, and so on. So that's really interesting. Atoms crash together without enough force to break up into a dense, opaque plasma of protons, neutrons, and electrons that scattered light like fog. Okay, let me go back, because for the first 380,000 years after the Big Bang, however, the intense heat from the universe's creation made it essentially too hot for light to shine. Atoms crash together with enough force to break up into dense, opaque plasma of protons, neutrons, and electrons that scattered light like fog. Step 4, and they've interestingly written here, let there be light. About 380,000 years after the Big Bang, matter cooled enough for electrons to combine with nuclei to form neutral atoms. Okay, so basically that makes sense, because like I just said, hydrogen has 1 electron, 1 proton. I'm remembering all this off the top of my head, which is insane. Helium, which I believe has 2 of all of them. Yeah, it does, because it has to have a full outer shell, otherwise it wouldn't be a noble gas. So helium has 2 that makes perfect sense why deuterium is in the middle. And deuterium is like Deuteronomy in the Bible, which is the second book of the Bible. Like, this is crazy. No, not the second book of the Bible. Sorry, not the second book of the Bible. The like fourth book of the Bible. This is just crazy how it's the same words. You got Genesis, Exodus. Wait, where is it? So I'm looking about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The middle point atom that doesn't actually exist in our current periodic table, deuterium, is said to be an isotope of hydrogen, which means it has a different number of neutrons, which it can because neutrons are not charged. Therefore, having a different number of neutrons doesn't change the charge of the atom itself because they're neutral. They're the only thing that's neutral inside the atom. And then they form it says to combine with nuclei to form neutral atoms. Helium is a neutral atom because helium is one of the what we call noble gases. As in, anyway, that's just crazy. That's crazy. Crazy. This phase is known as recombination, and the absorption of free electrons caused the universe to become transparent. That's interesting. The light that was unleashed at this time is detectable today in the form of radiation from the cosmic microwave background, yet the era of recombination was followed by a period of darkness before stars and other bright objects were formed. Oh my gosh, this sounds like the Bible. When I read this stuff, it literally sounds to me like the Bible, like the real life Bible, because they're saying that the era of recombination was followed by a period of darkness before stars and other bright objects were formed. We'll just leave it till we get to the Bible portion of this, guys. Just this, oh my days. Okay, so roughly 400 million years after the Big Bang. So the last, just to give an idea of time, the last time stamp was 380,000 years. Now it's 400 million years after the Big Bang. The universe began to come out of its dark ages. This period in the universe's evolution is called the Age of Reionization. Oh gosh. I'm reading these steps, by the way, for the first time now because I realized that it will be the most authentic. I saw the steps and I knew that this is what I wanted to add to the video, but I thought it would be the most authentic for me to like read this on camera so that you guys can see my authentic, real life, like first time seeing this and what instantly comes to my brain instead of me reading it beforehand, overthinking it and saying what I think sounds great as a YouTube content creator, right? So I'd rather give you guys the authentic experience. So this is why this is all fascinating me so much. So the Age of Reionization. This dynamic phase was thought to have lasted for more than 500 million years, but based on new observations, scientists think reionization may have occurred more rapidly than previously thought. During this time, clumps of gas collapsed enough to form the very first stars and galaxies. The emitted ultraviolet light, which we're going to talk about ultraviolet, stay tuned, from these energetic events cleared out and destroyed most of the surrounding neutral hydrogen gas. Okay. The process of reionization plus the clearing of foggy hydrogen gas caused the universe to become transparent to ultraviolet light for the first time. Step 6. More stars, more galaxies. Astronomers comb the universe looking for the most far-flung and oldest galaxies to help them understand the properties of the early universe. I know this is a lot of like really just like scientific stuff, guys, but I feel like it's important to say this stuff and to address it and to talk about it because it has to, when we get to the point of when we get to the biblical stuff, there has to be a basis. There has to be a foundation that we can come off from. I have to be able to say that we have looked at the science because otherwise it just looks like I'm another airy fairy Christian that lives in the clouds that just believes in God because it makes me feel good and I want to feel like I'm going somewhere nice when I die. I want to feel. But it's not about feelings. It's about facts. Because like I said, I love that 3x equals 12, x equals 4. I love that. I'm using that as an example because I hope that's simple algebra for everybody. Also, algebra is probably the easiest subject for me in maths. Can you believe it? Algebra, it was the easiest for me. For me, the statistics, probability, and all those nonsenses was the worst in maths. So anyway, so stick with me. Similarly, by studying the cosmic microwave background, astronomers can work backwards to piece together the events that came before. So again, this kind of like extrapolation going backwards type of thing. What's the opposite of extrapolation? Data from older missions like WMAP, which we talked about just now, and the Cosmic Background Explorer which launched in 1989, and missions still in operation like the Hubble Space Telescope, which launched in 1990, all help scientists to try and solve the most enduring mysteries and answer the most debated questions in cosmology. Now, what I want to point out here is that that's not that long ago. 1990 is 33 years ago. But like, scientists are walking around as if we know everything, and so much of this is new. Even this Georges Lemaitre, the guy who we all believe the Big Bang Theory for, only died in 1966. He came up with his first theory that we're all talking about in 1927. It hasn't even been 100 years. And that's one of my flaws with science as well, but we'll come back to that. But anyway, so step 7, birth of our solar system. Our solar system is estimated to have been born a little after 9 billion years after the Big Bang, making it about 4.6 billion years old. According to the current estimates, the sun is one of more than 100 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy alone and orbits roughly 25,000 light years from the galactic core, which I don't know what the galactic core is, I'll just say that now. Many scientists think the sun and the rest of our solar system was formed from a giant rotating cloud of gas and dust known as the solar nebula. As gravity caused the nebula to collapse, it spun faster and flattened into a disk. During this phase, most of the material was pulled toward the center from the sun. So again, trying to have all these explanations of this domino effect of events, starting with this explosion of a single highly, very hot, very dense particle, and how that has led to where we are today and the universe as it is today. Step 8, the invisible stuff in the universe. In the 1960s and 70s, so let's remember this, guys, this isn't that long ago. My parents were born in the 60s and the 70s. My mom was born in 1969, my dad was born in 1970. This isn't that long ago. My parents aren't old, okay? Astronomers began thinking that there might be more mass in the universe than what is visible. Vera Rubin, an astronomer at the Carnegie Institution of Washington, observed the speed of stars at various locations in galaxies. Basic Newtonian physics implies that the stars, so Newton's laws, we're not going to do Newton's laws in this video, implies that stars on the outskirts of galaxy would orbit more slowly than stars at the center, but Rubin found no difference in the velocities of the stars farther out. In fact, she found that all stars in a galaxy seem to circle the center at a more or less same speed. This mysterious and invisible mass became known as dark matter. Dark matter is inferred because of the gravitational pull it exerts on regular matter. One hypothesis states that the mystical stuff could be formed by exotic particles that don't interact with light or regular matter. Right, so it's almost like a parallel universe. That's basically what it's trying to say. Like, we live in a universe that's based off of light. So even the fact that you can see me right now is based off of the reflection of light, the light part, and all those types of things. I'm not going to get into it because it'll be really long. The video's already long so far. We haven't even got to the bit that I'm really looking forward to, which is the next part. Which is why it's been so difficult to detect. Step 9, the expanding and accelerating of the universe. In the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble made a revolutionary discovery about the universe. Using a newly constructed telescope at Mount Wilson Observatory in Los Angeles, Hubble observed that the universe is not static, but rather is expanding. Yes, we're back to this again. Decades later, in 1998. So your girl was here now. I was on this planet Earth. The prolific space telescope, named after the famous astronomer, the Hubble Space Telescope, studied very distant supernovas and found that a long time ago the universe was expanding more slowly than it is today. So the universe is expanding more quickly, according to science. This discovery was surprising because it was long thought that the gravity of matter in the universe would slow its expansion or even cause it to contract. Dark energy is thought to be the strange force that is pulling the cosmos apart at ever-increasing speeds, but it remains undetected and shrouded in mystery. The existence of this elusive energy, which is thought to make up 80% of the universe, so dark matter is believed by scientists to make up 80% of our universe, is one of the most hotly debated topics in cosmology, and this is true. So, yeah, the universe, according to science, as we speak right now, is expanding more quickly. Final step. I know this has been a long time coming, guys, but we have to go through it this way because I know we have to. While much has been discovered about the creation and evolution of the universe, there are enduring questions that remain unanswered. What is English? Remain unanswered. Dark matter and dark energy remain two of the biggest mysteries, but cosmologists continue to probe the universe in hopes of better understanding of how it all began. The James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, launched in 2021, only 2 years ago, will continue to hunt for the elusive dark matter as well as peering back to the beginning of time and the evolution of the universe using its infrared instruments. Interesting, because my research that I did that I want to talk to you guys about is I was actually studying the infrared spectra of molecules. Actually, I was predicting them to go to that level. So this is the accepted story of the history of the universe, both societally and scientifically, and where the basis for evolution and the backbone of modern science comes from. However, how does this theory hold up against fundamental scientific laws, and what does this have to do with the Bible? That last bit there, that's what I wrote in my notes. Let's go to the laws of thermodynamics. This is very heavily scientific, I know, for those of you who aren't into science, but just stick. If you're understanding enough right now that you're intrigued, keep going because it's going to make more sense. Trust me. So, part 3. Sorry, I'm talking so loudly, and this wine is actually amazing. I chose well. My friend in Italy, she's actually a sommelier, and so she taught me a lot about wine and everything. Amazing. Love that for me. Shout out to my girl. So, we're going to talk about the 4 laws of thermodynamics, because what I wanted to go to through the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory is this theory that's pretty unapproachable and ununderstandable for the average person. Now, that's a theory, and in science you have theories and then you have laws. Laws are usually things that are observable, quantitative truths about the universe. Like I said, my classic 3x equals 12, x equals 4. Because 3 times 4 equals 12. If you have 3x equals 12, 12 divided by 3 in order to find x on its own equals 4, right? So these are the things I like to listen to because they are calculatable. Is that a word? Who knows? Don't care. So we're looking here from the Chem Libre texts, specifically in Physical and Theoretical Chemistry textbook, the 4 laws of thermodynamics. The 0th law, which I find interesting that in science we do stuff like this. The 0th law of thermodynamics states that if 2 systems are in thermodynamic equilibrium with a third system, the 2 original systems are in thermal equilibrium with each other. So I'm going to explain this. Let me just finish reading it. I'm going to explain it. Basically, if system A is in thermal equilibrium with system C, and system B is also in thermal equilibrium with system C, system A and system B are in thermal equilibrium with each other. So what is it talking about when it talks about thermal equilibrium? Basically, you got to think of heat is a form of energy, kinetic energy, for example. So it's saying that the equilibrium, the balance of energies in systems, if there are 3 systems involved and they're all involved with each other, the energy balance between 2 systems is going to be true for all 3 because they're all in connection with each other. They're all going to balance each other out. That's basically what it's saying. Which brings us to the 1st law of thermodynamics. And the 1st law of thermodynamics states that energy can be converted from one form to another with the interaction of heat, work, and internal energy, but it cannot be created nor destroyed under any circumstances. It can be converted. So energy, this is where the whole energy cannot be created or destroyed thing comes into it, right? It can be transferred, it can be worked upon, utilized, but it cannot be destroyed or created. Which then takes us to the conservation of energy, the law of conservation of energy, which is the law of conservation of energy refers to an isolated system. So an isolated system is like a system that's isolated, in which there is no net change in energy, where energy is neither created nor destroyed. Although there is no change in energy, energy can change forms, for example, from potential to kinetic energy. In other words, potential energy, V, and kinetic energy, T, sum to a constant total energy, E, for a specific isolated system. That sounds really scientific. I'm going to make it sound really into English. So potential energy is the potential energy of something. If you were to evaluate potential energy of, say, yourself, your potential energy, let's say, if you're in the gym and you're doing a workout and you want to do some chest, you want to do the chest press, right? Your potential energy is, and it is a calculatable thing, although maybe not to us, or maybe not to science, that the potential, there is a number that can be calculated to how much weight you can do in a chest press. And that number can be associated as your potential energy. Kinetic energy is now something that's a completely slightly different type of thing, because it's the energy that's already in existence, that's already happening, the available energy, in a way, if you want to think of it like that. So those two energies together come together to form the constant total energy of the system. So that's why the universe can be seen as an isolated system, because if energy cannot be created nor destroyed, then the energy in the universe, there is only a amount of energy that is the amount of energy that is there, and we can't just create more because we want to. The way you could think about this, guys, similarly, is like how currency with money, right? A lot of the issues we have with money now, why money means nothing, is because initially money was supposed to be, the amount of money a country had was supposed to be based on the amount of gold they actually had. But now we're in a situation where the world is like, governments just print money when they need to. So now the money means nothing, because before, the money was relative to the actual amount of money that was the amount of gold that was available. So you can think about energy in the same type of way. And that's why energy, it's transferred. The same energy, the same amount of energy that exists in the universe is what we're all transferring between different things in different ways. Now onto the really important one that we're going to delve into more in a second. The second law of thermodynamics states that the state of the entropy of the entire universe as an isolated system. This is what scientists believe. And this is all important. I've spent 50 minutes, and I'm going to spend even a little bit more, explaining this so that I can back myself up when we get to the other parts of this video. Of an isolated system will increase over time. So the entropy, whatever that is, will increase over time in an isolated system. Therefore, the law of entropy itself, which we're going to come to in a minute. The second law also states that the changes in entropy in the universe can never be negative. They can never be negative. So there's only ever going to be more entropy. There is not going to be less entropy in the universe. Now, we don't know what entropy is. We're going to come to that in a minute. Finally, the third law of thermodynamics says it will essentially allow us to quantify the absolute amplitude of entropies. It says that when we are considering a totally perfect, 100% pure crystalline structure at absolute zero Kelvin, it will have no entropy. So something that is absolutely pure, perfect, has no entropy. Remember this, guys, because this is going to become important. Note that if the structure in question were not totally crystalline, it was not perfectly ordered. Because crystalline, in order to form crystals, all the different parts have to be in an exact position. That's why, one of the reasons why ice floats in water is because the crystalline structure of ice is less dense than water, and therefore the ice, although is a solid form of water, which in your brain would think would cause it to sink, the crystalline formation of water, which we also see in snowflakes and whatever else, right, when it forms ice and things, is less dense than the water, and that's why ice cubes actually float. So note, if the structure in question were not totally crystalline, then although it would have an extremely small disorder in space, we could not precisely say it had no entropy. So if it's not totally perfectly crystalline, if it's not totally perfectly in order, the entropy cannot be zero, because entropy is a measure of disorder. Now, let's get into that in a second. So what I have to say about this is, now that we have created a foundation of the understanding of some of the most fundamental and foundational scientific laws, let's look more into one of our few proofs of the existence of time, which is entropy, which is what we're talking about right now. Now that we have addressed the Big Bang Theory, we've looked at how the Big Bang Theory works, why it's important, and how it's formed the basis of where we are. Because what I didn't say before, which I'll say now, is this so-called expansion, or rather evolution of the universe, is where the theory of evolution comes from, how we came from primates, this, the other, starting with the smallest cell that turned into an amoeba, that turned into this, that turned into that, and now we have the human being, now we have the Homo sapien, right? That's based off of the Big Bang Theory. Now we have the law of entropy, which is explaining to us an important law of the universe that is an existence of time itself. Let's look at the law of entropy, which we're also looking at from the Chem Libre text, one of the books on there, Physical and Theoretical Chemistry. The second law of thermodynamics states that the state of entropy of the entire universe as an isolated system will always increase over time. The second law also states that the changes in entropy in the universe can never be negative, right? So let's talk about entropy, and I'm going to read what they've written here, and I'm going to explain it as we go through it, because this is where it gets really interesting. The introduction they've got here says, why is it that when you leave an ice cube at room temperature, it begins to melt? Why do we get older and never younger? And why is it whenever rooms are cleaned, they become messy again in the future? Certain things happen in one direction and not the other. This is called the arrow of time, and it encompasses every area of science. The thermodynamic arrow of time, which is entropy, is the measurement of disorder within a system. So entropy is a measure of disorder. Now, how does that make sense, and why does that matter? Because like I said, time is something that is much accepted. The fact that you are now 55, about to be 56 minutes into this video, and there was a point where you were 0 seconds into this video, 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, the fact that you were at a time A and are now at a time B is in and of itself as a result of entropy. Because the fact that if I pick up this glass right now that I have and I throw it on the ground and it smashes, right? The fact that it's now smashed, it went from being in one piece over here to being smashed, that is entropy, because it goes from being more ordered to less ordered. Just like how we are, as the book was saying, we are going from being, we are only getting older. I'm only getting closer to death. I'm not getting closer to life. I'm getting closer to death as time goes forward. The fact that me being 26 years old today, I'm going to be 27 next year and whatever, means that I'm getting closer to no longer being on this earth is an evidence of entropy. And we say that that is disorder because you are moving more from more orderly things, like this glass being in one piece is in order. If it smashes, it's in disorder. In the same ways that if you paint a wall in your house, the paint on the wall over time doesn't get more well painted. The paint starts to chip. There might be something, a smudge on there. There might be something. That's entropy. So let's continue. Oh, is this where we're at? Okay, I love this. Okay. If a given state can be accomplished in more ways, then it is more possible than the state that can only be accomplished in a fewer/one way. I.e., if there are two options of a state that something can exist in, the state that has more options is more probable than the one that is fewer. And they give an example here, and this is a perfect example. Assume a box filled with jigsaw pieces were jumbled in its box. The probability that a jigsaw piece will land randomly away from where it fits perfectly is very high. Almost every jigsaw piece will land somewhere away from its ideal position. The probability of a jigsaw piece landing correctly in its position is very low, as it can only happen one way. Thus, the misplaced jigsaw piece has a much higher multiplicity than the correctly placed jigsaw piece, and we can correctly assume that the misplaced jigsaw pieces represent a higher entropy. So basically, the fact that if you have a jigsaw puzzle, let's say you have it in a box, the probability that you shake that box and all those pieces just sit where they're supposed to be is virtually zero. So small. Very, very small. Let's not say virtually zero because I haven't calculated it. It's incredibly small. But the probability that they are not in the place where they're supposed to be is very high. That is the evidence of entropy. The fact that the most orderly state that could happen is the most least likely state that will happen. Does that make sense? That's what and the law of entropy is talking about, which we're going to get into why this is important, right? And how this connects to the Big Bang Theory, because the Big Bang Theory is one that extends all the way back to the idea that there was a finite point in time where this expansion started. Remember, that's where we started with this. So just run with me here, because I'm setting a foundation, and we're literally, the next section is going to go into the Bible, which I can't wait for that, because that's the bit that's just amazing. So derivation and explanation. To understand why entropy increases and decreases, it is important to recognize that two changes in entropy have to be considered at all times: the entropy change of the surroundings and the entropy change of the system itself. Given the entropy change of the universe is equivalent to the sum of changes in entropy of the system and surroundings, i.e., the entropy change of the universe equals, this is a physical equation, the entropy change of the surroundings and the entropy change of the system. The second law of thermodynamics, the entropy change, which is denoted as delta S, as in the triangle Greek number, the Greek for delta is triangle, delta S. Anytime you see delta in science, the triangle, it means change. That's why, like, delta H, change in enthalpy, delta S, change in entropy, equals 0 for a truly reversible process. So something that can actually be reversed, the change in entropy will be 0. And it's greater than 0 for an irreversible process. In reality, so when you can't change the situation, it has to be more than 0. This is why the change in entropy cannot ever be 0 in the universe, because when I smash a glass, the chances of that going back to being one glass in one piece is 0. So therefore, the entropy, the change in disorder, or the trajectory towards disorder, it cannot be it cannot equal 0, because it can't do that, because it's irreversible, basically. Sorry, I was just double checking it. In reality, however, truly reversible processes never happen, or will take an infinitely long time to happen. So it's safe to say all thermodynamic processes we encounter every day are irreversible in the direction they occur. I.e., if you crack an egg, there is no way, or there is a very small, tiny probability and way that you're going to put that egg back together to form one egg. The reality is more likely that you'll never be able to do that, no matter how many ways you try. That's essentially what it's saying. Therefore, the second law of thermodynamics can also be stated that all spontaneous processes produce an increase in the entropy of the universe. Therefore, anything that happens in life is moving more towards disorder. That's why the law of entropy states that the universe is always moving more to a place of disorder. Just by living, just by being alive, everything in the universe is moving more towards disorder than towards order. Now, I want to point out something here, and this is going to form the basis of where we're going biblically, right? So one thing that the law of entropy and the Big Bang Theory can agree upon is that in order for us to go from A to B, in order for us to go from ordered to disordered, whatever level it is, there has to be a distance between those two things, the velocity, the time. There's a time element. At one point, something existed as this, and at another point, it existed as that. Similar to the example I gave earlier in the video, where I was talking about cars, and I was saying that at a certain point, if you're on the highway, there's a car that's next to you. There was a moment where that car wasn't next to you, and then there was a moment where it was, and there is a time associated. Entropy is the proof of that, because entropy is saying that the fact that there is a difference is a proof that time exists. However, entropy is stating that the universe is moving further towards disorder, not order. But the Big Bang Theory is stating that we are evolving and we are becoming more orderly. And for me, that's why I think the Big Bang Theory doesn't hold itself up, because the Big Bang Theory is just a theory based on a lot of things we don't know and a lot of things we're still observing. The law of entropy is something that we can all see in our day-to-day lives, that we can actively, physically, this is why I like physics and physical chemistry, we can physically see is happening in our day-to-day, because we know it. You know that if you smash a plate, that by accident even, you're not just going to be able to go back to that plate being in one position. You don't just get to hit the rewind button. This is life. This is an irreversible situation. Even if you get the best super glue and the best whatever, that plate is still in a place of disorder. That's how the universe is set up. And so let's look at the thing that these two theories both agree with, which is that there was a specific point where whatever happened, whether evolution or whether the starting of entropy, where it had to happen. And for me, when I thought about it, it took me straight to the Bible. It took me straight to the Bible, and it took me straight to Genesis. Because I asked God, I was like, well, God, if entropy exists, at what point does entropy start? Because there has to be a starting point. Both the Big Bang Theory and the law of entropy are stating that there is a starting point. The scientific evidence, the scientific theories, and the scientific studies that are happening right now are proving that scientists still don't know, mathematically, according to them, what that point is. And now I want to take it to the Garden of Eden. So, do I want to start here? I feel like I want to start at... I'm going to start at Genesis 2 for now. Not sure if that's the best decision. But I'm going to start at Genesis 2 for now. Right? So the heavens and the earths, I'm reading from the Amplified version, I believe. So the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts, inhabitants. And by the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it as his own, that is, set it apart as holy from the other days, because in it he rested from all his work which he had created and done. Right? Which we're not even going to get into that in this video, because that's what this video is about. This is the history of the origin of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day, that is, days of creation, that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. No shrub nor plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprouted. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain on earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. But a mist, fog, dew, vapor used to rise from the land and water the entire surface of the ground. Interesting, because we talked about this fog idea in the Big Bang Theory. The Lord God formed, that is, created the body of man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being, an individual complete in body and spirit. And the Lord God planted a garden, oasis in the east, in Eden, delight, land of happiness. And he put man who he had created, there. And in that garden, the Lord God caused to grow from the ground every tree that is desirable and pleasing to the sight, and good, suitable, pleasant for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the experiential knowledge, recognition of the difference between good and evil. Now, what I want to first of all point out here is that according to the Bible, there's a very specific chain of events that took place. And actually, the part that I didn't read in Genesis, which I'll just read the verse quickly just to make my point. It says, where are we? In the beginning, God, Elohim, created by forming from nothing the heavens and the earth. So he formed from nothing. The earth was, does it say the earth was without form and void, which is tohu wabohu in Hebrew? Yes, the earth was formless and was void or a waste in emptiness, and the darkness was upon the deep, primeval ocean that covered the unformed earth. So there was no order, there was just the universe, there was God. And I want to just point out right now something very important, that God doesn't necessarily say what was there. He just says what wasn't there. He says the earth was without form and void. So a lot of people like to fill in the blanks for what God didn't say. Yeah, don't do that. But what I want to talk about is the fact that God had a very orderly chain of events of how he created the world. He started off with let there be light. He created the heavens. He created the earth. You guys can read it for yourself. It's Genesis 1 in the Bible. And then once the world was created, he then needed to think about humanity, because he had created, and we're still going to get to the point of entropy, by the way, guys, where entropy started. He had created this universe before he could create the land that needed to be looked after and lived in harmony with. He had to create the people that were going to live in harmony with it. And so he goes on to create man, which is where he then creates the man. And And then he tells them that there's the tree of life, and there's this tree, the tree of life, and the tree of experiential knowledge, recognition of the difference between good and evil. So you can gain the knowledge of what's good and evil from eating from this tree, pretty much. Now a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 branching rivers. The first river is named Pishon. It flows around the entire land of Havilah. Okay, I'm going to skip through this because this video is already... Okay, so now we're here at verse 15. So the Lord God took the man he had made and settled him in the garden to cultivate and keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, you may freely, unconditionally, eat the fruit from every tree of the garden, but only from the tree of the knowledge of recognition of good and evil you shall not eat. Otherwise on that day you will eat from it, and you will most certainly die. This is the important thing we're going to talk about in a second. Now the Lord God said, it is good, beneficial for the man. It is not good, beneficial for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper, one who balances him, a counterpart who is suitable and complementary for him. So the Lord God formed out of the ground every animal of the field, every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. So God even gave the power of naming the creatures and everything in the world to humanity, to Adam. And the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and to every animal of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper that was suitable companion for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and while he slept he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh of that place, and the rib which the Lord had taken from the man he had made, fashioned, formed into a woman, and he brought her and presented her to the man. Then Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of a man. For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed or embarrassed. Now this for me is such an important part of the Bible, because God is an orderly person. God tells Adam before Eve even exists, you shall not eat of the fruit of any other tree, of every fruit, of the trees of this garden, except from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God creates the animals and everything to be a companion to humanity. And then he goes on to say, there is not one fit for Adam, and he creates somebody who is compatible. And I believe the fact that he took one of Adam's ribs is a sign of compatibility. This is somebody who you are built to become one with. This is somebody who, even if you think about the rib and how the rib protects the heart, you know what I mean? Somebody that's supposed to be a safe space for you, you know what I'm saying, type of thing. To even have like the type of relationship with, of like what the functionality of your rib was in the first place. This is just coming to my mind now as I'm even saying it. But then God goes on to say that you shall become one flesh. This is God's intention. He's very orderly. He builds the world. At the point where he's ready to build, he's built everything as it is. Now he needs humanity, because humanity are going to be the ones there. He builds Adam, the man who's due to be the head of the house, to be the head of this relationship, and so on and so forth. He gives Adam the rules, the logic, the logos, as the Bible is also known as the logos word of God, the logical word of God. He tells him, this is what you do. You have everything is up to you. You name that. This is your domain. You name the animals. You name you name it all. I'm giving this to you, right? Then he brings the woman along. He says, you guys become one flesh. You guys are one together. And then what do? Everything is in order. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more crafty, subtle, and skilled in deceit than any living creature of the field which the Lord God had made. And the serpent, Satan, which the word Satan, the Satan, is a title, means the accuser, said to the woman, can it really be that God has said, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees of the garden, except the fruit from the tree which is in the middle of the garden. So interesting how, again, I'm just noticing right now as I'm reading it, the enemy comes in to say, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden. And Eve actually recites back the truth of, no, we just can't eat from this one tree in the garden. God said, you shall not eat from it, nor touch it, otherwise you will die. Now, the interesting thing about this for me, and this is going to become important in a minute, guys. I know this is all crazy, is God told this to, the Bible only references God telling Adam. So I believe that God didn't let, it doesn't matter which way you believe it, whether God told Eve as well or whether God told Adam to tell Eve, but I believe Eve found out from Adam. And that's going to become important in a minute. But the serpent said to the woman, you certainly will not die. So there's the lie of the enemy always. Like, what do you mean? What does he mean the God is saying this? Like, there's no way. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and the tree to be desired in order to make one wise and insightful, so she was seduced. Now, this is the interesting thing, because I really believe that the enemy taught us women about seduction in the garden, because she was seduced. Listen to what it says. And you will be, when it says, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was delightful to look at, and a tree to be desired in order to make one wise and insightful, she took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some to her husband with her, and he ate. Now, we're going to talk about this in a minute, why this is problematic. We're going to address Eve, don't you guys worry. Then the eyes of the two of them were opened, that is, their awareness increased, and they knew that they were naked, and they fastened fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool afternoon breeze of the day. So the man and his wife hid and kept themselves hidden from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to Adam, and said to him, where are you? He said, I heard the sound of you walking in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. How many of us have that relationship with the Lord now, with God, where we know we've messed up? And this is what I really believe is why most people don't even want to talk to God or address it, because it's hard to say, I messed up and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? God said, who told you that you were naked? Like, how do you even, have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat? Now, I want to talk about this, first of all. God told them that if they eat from the tree, they would die. At this point of this conversation, Adam and Eve have not died. So what was it that God meant when he said, you shall surely die? Because they didn't immediately die. They didn't eat the fruit and then die in some dramatic Shakespearean, like, moment. No, they didn't. So what does it mean? And what does this have to do with entropy? Let's keep going. Oh, and oh. And the man said, the woman who you gave to be with me, the woman you gave me, she gave me fruit from the tree and I ate it. Then the Lord said, notice how God doesn't rebuke Adam. He just goes straight to then ask Eve now. Then God said to the woman, what is it that you have done? Also interesting that she's called a woman, because Adam names Eve. Fast forward in about a couple of verses, about 7 verses, Adam is the one who calls Eve, which just, I have so much to say about. I have so much revelation about Adam and Eve, like, it's a joke. But anyways, not important for this video. What is it? And then God said to the woman, what is it that you have done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled and deceived me, and I ate from the forbidden tree. The Lord God said to the serpent. So, here we go. This is where I believe disorder began. Ladies and gentlemen, God had an order. God had an order of how he created the universe at a specific point in time. He creates light and darkness. He creates the heavens and the earth, the seas and the everything, right? Then he creates man. He gives man the instruction. Then he creates woman. They're existing together. They're supposed to become one flesh, a unit. And the first ever disorder that took place was that man and woman, in fact, but man and woman denied the Lord. Eve went out of her way, and this is why I believe that a lot of the issues we talk about today as men and women, they stem from Adam and Eve. This is why I believe we're in this one huge domino effect of the disorder that started in the Garden of Eden, where Adam trusted in the woman he should have been able to trust in, because God made somebody compatible, somebody that he would enjoy, somebody. The way that Eve looks at the tree, at the fruit, is the way I believe Adam was to look at his woman, right? It says, and how a man should be able to look at his wife. It says, what does it say? Where is it? The fall. Yes, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and a tree to be desired in order to make one wise and insightful. I believe that was the intention of God for what a wife is supposed to be. Because I believe that God is a combination of logic and wisdom. Logic and spirituality. Spirit, right? Because wisdom has no good or evil. Wisdom is just the laws of the matrix, if you will. Logic is what helps us to understand what is right and what is wrong. And that's why I believe as women, we are very susceptible to this spirituality, being emotional, fantasizing, and all of this, because it's natural that we have this type of wisdom, understanding, and this ability that when abused turns to seduction, that we learned from the enemy. We have this power because that type of opportunity to gain those things is seductive, right? And if used in the way that God intends, is a good thing, right? If used in the way that the enemy intends, is a bad thing. And that's where the disorder started. So as soon as us as women, and this is why I do believe in men being the head of the house. I know people don't like that to hear that, but also I don't want the pressure of being the head of the house. Like, excuse me, no, like I'm happy being over here just doing what I gotta do, okay? This is why I believe in that. And then that's also why I believe that God gave the instruction to Adam, because God was like, listen, she's gonna get caught up. I need you to be the man. You know what I'm saying? And I really believe that. And I don't believe it's making anybody better or worse, because the two things, they are good together and they're compatible. They are one flesh. God said it was not good for Adam to be alone. So it doesn't mean that men, I'm trying to say this on behalf of the ladies, because the fellas are going to understand what I'm saying, I'm pretty sure, right? But on behalf of the ladies, it's not saying that men are like more important. It's that you have an individual place. The same way that God has the law, the logic, the logos, word of God, the Bible, and also the Rhema, the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. Those two things have to work together. And the number one way you know which spirit you're dealing with, which I know this from dealing with things on a spiritual level, we're going to come back to the entropy thing, guys, is because you compare the two. If a spirit is saying something, if spiritually, emotionally, it doesn't go along with the word, the logos, then it's not from God. And so I believe this is when disorder started. I believe it started with Adam and Eve. They went against God. Then that caused a division between man and God, and a division between man and woman, right? And then you go through the rest of the Bible, and it's just division after division after division after division, right? You have Cain and Abel, who were the offspring of Adam and Eve, right? What happens? Cain kills Abel. Yes, why does Cain kill Abel? Because Abel had brought an offering to the Lord. Cain brought an offering to the Lord. The Lord was happy with Abel's offering, but not Cain's. Cain looks at Abel like, well, I'm a killer, man, because why does he get what I don't have? And the Lord even tried to tell Abel, listen, if you just do well, you will have the same benefits as your brother. But if you do not, if there is sin is knocking at your door, that's what literally says, sin is knocking at your door. If you do not overcome it, you will regret this. And he kills his brother instead. Jealousy. The deciphering between the wise and the fool. That's the next stage of disorder in this universe, was Cain and Abel. We went from Adam and Eve, man and woman. Cain and Abel, brother and brother. The jealous. Right? The delusional. Because Cain, all Cain had to do was just do what he needed to do and it would have been fine. It would have been like, oh, you didn't get it right the first time. It's okay, you got it the second time. That's what it would have had to be. But no, it's like people in the world today. It's like jealous people. And this is why jealousy, the jealous spirit, is connected to this, the murderous spirit. Cain killed Abel. Saul wanted to kill David. The Pharisees and the chief priests of God were the ones responsible for Jesus dying. The murderous spirit. And you go on and you go on and you go on. And I've got a list here of all the various stories that come after. Right? You've got Noah. The times of Noah, what was happening? The angels rebelled against God. And so did the people. The angels were having children with the women. They formed the Nephilim, the giants, etc., etc. Right? You keep going. Well, Abraham and Sarah. Abraham, not a lot of people talk about this. Somebody actually backtracked fatherlessness back to Abraham because they were talking about how he had a child with, I believe her name was Torah. There's a woman he had 4 kids with. Sarah's an interesting character because Sarah told Abraham to have a kid with her servant, which is how we got Ishmael, right? And then when the prophet, because she wasn't sure about the prophecies of God, right? Then when Isaac comes along, she was threatened that Ishmael might get the benefits her son Isaac should have. So she actually was the reason why Abraham then banishes Ishmael and Ishmael's mum. But then Abraham also had sons with another woman as well, who were all banished. So some people talk about, some of whom which went to Africa. Some people talk about how this has got to do with the connection of fatherlessness, again, going back into the Bible. Just like how the fall, the separation of man and woman, the abuse of us as women and the power that God gave us, or men, and the dynamics between us goes back to the Bible. Disorder. Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob and Esau, right? And his son Joseph. Joseph with all of his, Jacob first of all had to kind of swindle his blessings because Esau was actually the older sibling. Esau, because he was desperate to have food, gave up his birthright to his brother, his whole birthright, just for the sake of a meal, right? Talk about being a slave to your flesh, right? Slave to your flesh. Jacob then goes on to turned into Israel, where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. One of his sons, Joseph, known in the Bible, what happened with Joseph? His brothers, who heard of his dream, where they all bowed to him or whatever, tried to kill him. Little did they know that each of them, Judah, his brother, was the one who the tribe where Jesus Christ came from, the tribe of Judah. That's why people call him the Lion of the tribe of Judah, because Judah, that's where they came from. You look at Issachar and other siblings, they all have their extensions. Issachar was a ancestor of like Deborah, who was one of the judges in the Bible. And like all of these stories, and you look at all these people with the jealousy that continued on from Cain and Abel, that continued into the destruction and the disorder, and you keep going, you keep going. You have Moses. Moses breaks the people of God out of slavery. The Bible is a story of how us as humans know absolutely nothing about what we're doing. Every time we just go with what we think is the best, we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we find ourselves in situations that we put ourselves in, and then God steps in to help us. God steps in to save us because he loves us, not because he's not there judging us. He's there like, why will you guys not trust the person who created this universe? And then I have the hacks to the universe. I can bend the matrix as I wish to because I created this world, and nobody's going to create anything else. But we don't listen, do we? We continue, and then it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. We have Samson and Delilah. Samson was powerful. Samson was the one who was tearing lions apart with his bare hands. I talked about this in my wisdom challenge at the start of this year in January, day 5. Check that out. It's one of my best videos on YouTube, right? Why does Samson end up dead? Because Samson thought he knew better. He was sleeping with this prostitute, Delilah. And do you know why he lost his power? Because he spent so much time around this witch, which I've done many videos talking about how women are either witches or angels. There's no in between. It's because we're spiritually natured and we have power spiritually that doesn't make any sense, right? Because God intended for it to be that way, just like how men have other powers that we as women can't understand, but they have them, right, over us. So Samson, even though he was this powerful fighter and everything, why does he end up dead? Because it says in the Bible that Delilah vexed him to death. Twice she'd asked him, Samson, what is it that gives you your power? He tells her. She tells the Philistines. They do it, it doesn't work. She does it again. They do it, it doesn't work. Third time, you think Samson's woken up. No, she's nagging him. He gives in and he's like, you know what? This is what it is. Cuts his hair. His eyes get gouged out. He becomes the Joker in front of his enemies. And then he finishes his story with him pulling the pillars where him and his ops were, and he dies as a result of the fact that this man could not overcome the fact that he was sleeping with a prostitute. Can we talk about disorder? Can we talk about disorder? Can we talk about that? So we keep going on. Then there's Saul and David. God didn't even want to make a king. You see with Saul, right? The people, us. This is us again showing we don't know what we're doing, and that are left alone, us in the universe, and the universe of itself is always moving more to a place of disorder. Saul in the Bible, you can read about it for yourself. All of this, by the way, guys, these revelations I've had about people in the Bible is me reading the Bible for myself. Not a pastor, not a ministry. This is my own time reading the Bible and talking to God honestly and openly. That's how we got to all of this. Nothing else. Saul in the Bible. The people wanted a king. God was like, I don't want to give a king. Prior to that, we had judges. In fact, any type of like real leadership had really started with Moses specifically. God, he was then a judge, and then Moses, his father-in-law, was like, listen, you can't be dealing with everybody's problems, so you need to give this job, extend this job to other elders who we can trust to give advice and to judge the people of God. And he did that, and then it went on and on and on. We had the judges. That's where all the Samson, Delilah's people, Deborah's, Samson's, all of that. Samuel was in there as well. Actually, Samuel was coming in a minute because Samuel's to do with Saul as well. Then the people wanted to have a king. God said in the Bible, I don't want to make a king. He said, my people are going to regret having a king, and I'm going to give them a king anyway. Gives them King Saul, who cares more about impressing the people, who cares more about the approval of the people than the approval of God, right? Disorder, once again. And this just cascades into all this other disorder. Then we find ourselves at Jezebel and Ahab. Ahab, again, supposed to be the king of God, whatever, right? And the people of Israel who comes after Saul. Saul was the first king. Then we had David, Solomon. That worked out. But then Solomon also got caught up. Solomon has a whole book in the Bible in Ecclesiastes. Solomon was the wealthiest and wisest in the world. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and he was the richest man ever. And he talks about in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible how this is all nothing. Everything in the world, everything that this entropy of this world that you guys are so invested in is worth nothing. And when you get there, you'll realize that. And we see that today. We hear celebrities say the same things, but we don't believe it because we're so enslaved to mammon, to this idea that when we have money, when we have this, when I have all the women, when I have all the money, when I have this, I'm going to be happy. Disorder. We think we know what's best, but we don't. Disorder. Just like Eve. That's why I say that's the starting point for me of entropy. You go on to, Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab, again, he was like the first super feminine man mentioned in the Bible. Like Jezebel was running the show. She brought her demonic gods with her. She was just a tyrant. And you know what's funny about how Jezebel died? She reminds me of the women of today a lot. Jezebel died because when the person of God finally said enough is enough, do you know what Jezebel was doing? She was sitting on the balcony doing her makeup. Sitting on the balcony doing her makeup. I'll leave that with you. And I'm not trying to say that, I'm not demonizing makeup, by the way. I'm talking about the vanity and the seductive nature of us as women, and how the deception of femininity, which is something I've talked about a lot on this channel, how we get away with stuff because we're supposed to be trusted and because we've learned this seductive behavior of manipulation. And unfortunately, a lot of these things are used as tools, makeup, BBLs, you name it, right? And so the list goes on and on and on and on. And then you see the rest of the Bible. And so then when I come to this guy, this Georges Lemaitre, trying to say that the Bible and science is separate, I think not at all. I think all of science points to the idea that the universe was created in a specific way and started at a specific time. Scientists are consistently being proven that, oh, we were wrong. Oh, we thought the universe was static. Oh, we were wrong. And then one of the laws that is the most important law that we all observe, wherever you are in the world, whatever gender you are, whatever age you are, whatever culture and religious belief, we can all agree about the existence of time. And yet that one law, or other laws as well, but we're talking about these specifically, directly proves that the Big Bang Theory is a scam and evolution. Not to mention, the state of this world in and of itself proves that's a scam. Because we need more medicine than ever. We need therapy. We need to be, we're struggling with obesity. We're over-consuming. We're overstimulating ourselves. We're doing too much. The world is going downhill. More and more people are lonely. We're living in a world where there are more and more access to people than ever. I can access millions of people online. And yet people will kill themselves due to loneliness. Does that sound like we're evolving? No, the freak, it doesn't. And I want to talk about how we got here and how we all fell into this scam of whatever we're at now. And I want to talk about a very interesting experiment. I don't think I've written the name of the guy who does this experiment, which makes me really annoyed because I wish I'd written it. There was a science experiment that was done. It's called it was a 5-monkey experiment. So basically what happened is, I'm going to summarize it because this video is already so long. Basically what happened is, I can't remember what it is, but if you search like the 5-monkey experiment, it's by like Harry. His first and surname both start with the H. That's all I know. But anyway, basically what happened was they had a bunch of monkeys. There was like 5 monkeys. And what they did is the monkeys were given, let's say, a banana. I think it was a banana. And then when they retrieved this banana, they were tortured somehow. And then like proper torture, I believe it's like they were sprayed with lots of water. Is it sprayed with lots of water? An icy spray. So sprayed with like ice water, right? So basically what happened is those 5 monkeys to start with realized that if the banana was there, they weren't going to go for it because they were going to be sprayed with this icy water. So what they started to do is then swap out monkeys. So swap out one monkey. The new monkey doesn't know what's going to happen if they go for this banana. So where they go for the banana and then the other monkeys would attack this one monkey, right? And they would keep swapping them out and the same thing would happen until all of these 5 monkeys were new monkeys. And all of these monkeys would not go for the banana, but these 5 monkeys don't know why. They just know that other people will beat them up or they get beaten up and therefore they don't go for the banana. But they don't know what's the problem in the first place. And that's the world we live in now. We live in a world where people believe in stuff and blindly follow in this sheephood or sheeple, as somebody said, behavior where we're all doing something and we don't really know why we're doing it. We all believe something, but we don't really know why. Like people believe in science, right, over God, right? But they can't actually tell you, they can't explain, like how I spent the first hour of this video, any of the stuff I just explained. They can't even explain God either. They just know they side with science because we just do. Why? Because we live in a society, in a world where God has been demonized and science has been made to be the God of this world, the thing that we can trust in. And it is the greatest trick of the kingdom of darkness. Because the universe in and of itself scientifically has been proven that it's moving more from a state of order to disorder. And yet we would rather trust in science that is flawed. Let's talk about my research. I did research. Here's the title of my research project. Computational chemistry predictions of IR, infrared, and UV vis, ultraviolet visible, emission spectra of small organic molecules. I'm going to read you guys a part, and I checked it over this ahead of time so I would know which part to quote in my research. This is me quoting my own writing right here, okay? Love this for me. It says, this is my own work, guys. Ab initio methods, i.e. methods from first principle, are used to acquire information by solving the Schrodinger equation, which we're going to come to the Schrodinger equation in a minute. The time-independent Schrodinger equation is incredibly important and useful in quantum chemistry as it can be operated on with the Hamiltonian operator, which results in the determination of eigenvalues, e.g. energy levels. Follow me and hear me out. The wave function, so basically you're looking at the wave function, the energy of the system, and the Hamiltonian operator, which we'll come back to. That's what the Schrodinger equation is. The Hamiltonian operator times the wave function equals the energy of the system times by the wave function. That's the Schrodinger equation. The wave function itself is probably the most significant concept of quantum mechanics. It was first introduced by Schrodinger in 1926, again, not even 100 years ago, when particles were shown to have behavior like waves, with the wave function describing the property of these waves. Again, we're trying to find these deeper scientific understandings and explanations of these molecules and everything. Born altered this theory, forming his own probability interpretation, stating that the wave function is a probability amplitude. So a probability. This is what people don't understand about this whole Schrodinger's cat thing, which is all to do with how Schrodinger's cat could be there. It could be, if it's in a box, it could be dead or it could be alive. And we're just looking at the probabilities and the approximations and the assumptions of whether it could or couldn't be alive, right? It's actually just as baseless and airy-fairy as a lot of the things that people believe in the New Age and all of this astrology, astronomy stuff. This is also known as the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm going to leave it. Wait, let me just read this, because I don't want to read it if it's too much. Okay, so I'll read this last part. Once the wave function has been determined for an individual state of a system, any physical observable can, in principle, be found. I can't believe I wrote this. The wave function of a molecule can be derived by the product of the combination of atomic orbitals, i.e. a linear combination of atomic orbitals, which is like the energy levels in an electron in an atom. These molecular wave functions are approximate, with the degree of how approximate these molecular wave functions are dependent upon the complexity of the system. However, the electronic and nuclear motion must be separated. So why have I just quoted this specifically? The reason I've quoted this is to say that even in science itself, we're dealing with assumptions, approximations, and theories, some of which can be observably quantitated, I just made that word up, such as time, others of which are purely theoretical. I will never forget the day when I learnt, you know, when you draw an atom and you draw like the little center, then you draw the rings around it and you draw the electrons. I'll never forget when I learned what an energy level or an orbital, which is where you find electrons in the shells on the outside, the definition was something stupid like a space where you're highly likely to find an electron. We don't know anything. 20 years ago, it was only in the year 2000, that they made the first announcement of our understanding of the structure of deoxyribonucleic acid, also known as DNA. And now we're doing all this mRNA, messenger ribonucleic acid research. And it just so happens to suggest that we are clearly moving more to disorder. We've got all these new allergies, all these new disorders, literal disorders. Everybody's got a disorder. Everybody's got an allergy. Everybody's dying sooner. Everybody's got these diseases. The world is going downhill. We've got climate change. We've got, what they call it? Some of these things I don't believe in, by the way, but this is how the world perceives them. We're moving downhill. When did it start? In the garden. The Bible, quite literally, to me, is an explanation of the starting point of entropy and the unfolding of entropy before our very eyes. And if we think about it, this point that the Big Bang theorists want to extrapolate back to where it started, is right there in Genesis. After God had orderly created everything to be orderly and had done things in a completely intentional way. And this is why when people are like, oh, like God is just this and God is science. This is why this Georges Lemaitre guy and me are very different. He lives in religion. Religious people have to decipher between God and science, because religious people are illogical people. Religious people rely on the idea of being better than or knowing better than. That's what they do. That's why they enjoy people looking up to them, because they believe in something. But as somebody who truly believes in God, you must be open to critique, criticism, accountability. Right? Because we are all on our own, as the law of entropy states, moving more to a state of disorder. And my relationship with God, the reason why I can sit here before you guys and make this video and put all this stuff together in my brain, is because of me submitting myself to God and saying, you know what, God, I don't know everything. In fact, there's a lot I don't know. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to let you guide me. You guide me because you know better. And that's why I believe true wisdom is to follow God. Why? Because God created the universe. I was watching, and I loved this, by the way. I just watched, like, not even a week ago, Spider-Man Into the Universe and Spider-Man Into the Universe, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Into the Universe, and Spider-Man Across the Universe, Across the Spider-Verse. You guys get the gist. The Spider-Verse movies, the first two ones, the animated series. So good, by the way. And as I was watching it, it really interested me, because I remembered how with science fiction, right? Science fiction is like scientists' way of somehow trying to find a way to explain supernatural activity. So in the movie, I won't give spoilers, but let's just say this Spider-Verse is a universe where lots of multiple parallel universes exist at the same time as each other. And that's actually what scientists believe, and one of the ways that scientists try to prove supernatural behaviors. Now, the movies itself, if you think about them completely from a scientific perspective, clearly show that is a flawed way of thinking, because that system is manipulated, and when it is manipulated, it doesn't necessarily affect all the other universes in the way that you would quantitatively, scientifically, mathematically predict that it would. And that's what, for me, always points everything back to God, where it's like God created the universe. So when he wants to go against the laws of his own universe, he can. Right? Who wants to get us into a system? Who wants to get us into this place where we think that we can only follow these rules, where we have to be enslaved like the Israelites, believing that if we go outside the grain, if we believe the conspiracy theorists, if we go against the crazy head Moses who's going against whatever, that this will be a bad thing. It's the monkeys experiment. We are living as the monkeys in this experiment, where we don't do things, we don't believe in things, not because we've looked into it for ourselves, not because we've really invested into looking into it for ourselves, but because this is this society accepted thing, because we've been told by others. And that's why the disorder continues. People don't even believe in the things of God. But yet God is the answer to all of the questions that science has on offer, and is the proof of the things that don't make sense, because I think we can all agree at the very least we're not evolving as people. Technology is only making us more stupid, more reliant. If there was a real life zombie apocalypse right now, what would most of us do? If there was an atomic bomb that we somehow as humans managed to survive, but everything else was obliterated, who's going to build the houses? Who knows how to catch fish? Who knows how to kill an animal to eat for clothing? Who knows how to build shelter? Who knows how to create a fire? We're not more intelligent. We're more dependent and stupid. That's the truth. And unless because one of the things about entropy that states is that if the only way to go against entropy is you have to have a force that actively goes against it. And I believe that force is God. And I believe that in the Bible, the whole of the Old Testament was God showing how us on our own, he was trying to show us, look, I love you guys and I'll stick by you, whatever. Here's what it looks like when you guys think you know what you're doing. And that's why the gospel of Jesus Christ is the good news, because God's like, even though you've messed everything up, even though you have put yourself so far down the wrong path that realistically everything should keep going downhill, I'm prepared to switch that up for you and give you the life that I built, the best version of your success that I have built into this universe for you. I will help you to be that, like a true parent. That's why the Bible says, people talk about Exodus and they're like, oh, it says, honor your mother and father and you shall live long. It's not like a, if you do this then that. It's like a, if you have respect and honor for good, loving, mature and wise parents, they will give you the tools and the wisdom to live long. And that's where I get my relationship with God is exactly like that. I'm not saying that's true for all parents. In fact, a lot of parents today have completely abdicated from that role. A lot of parents today are rather just make excuses or just talk down on the younger generations. Guess what, guys? I'm 26 years old. Okay, I just want to say that. God is my father. I gave my life to Jesus at 7 years old. And that's why I am who I am today, right? Because of God and God only. I'll just say that for sure. I'll say that for sure. That's why I can boldly stand here and sit here and make this video. I can boldly call my channel The Winning Team, because I'm not subject. I am not enslaved to the entropy of this universe, because I have God. And that's how God intended. He intended for man and woman to be a happy, united unit, one flesh that works well together, that has different things that benefit each other and different things they appreciate about each other. He intended for a brother to continue forward and support each other, be there for each other and teach each other things, and so on and so forth, and other siblings and communities and everything. That was his intention, and that is his perfect will, and that is orderly. But the disorder, when there is a division between man and woman, between brother and sister, between friend and friend, between religions, that is the workings of the kingdom of darkness. And that's why I believe, guys, that heaven is the place of total order. God created the earth to be as it was in heaven. That's why the Bible says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven, for me, is a place of total order, and hell, a place of total disorder. And the reason why we're moving towards hell, when God said that when you sin, you shall surely die, it's because humanity and man and woman opened the door to disorder. And therefore time started, because now we have a destination. Before, we were already on location of where we were supposed to be. We opened the door to disorder and we cascaded ourselves towards death. And that's why Jesus had to overcome death, because he had to overcome disorder. Total disorder, which is death itself. And what happens to us when we die? Our bodies decompose and it's ugly and we stink and our skin rots and there's maggots and all this stuff. Why? Because that's total disorder of humanity. The complete opposite is us being these perfect beings in heaven. And that's why I don't believe that God sends people to hell. I believe we choose heaven or we choose hell, and we take ourselves where we want to go. The only thing that's stopping us is our monkey sheephood. Us doing things, not giving God a serious chance, and addressing it in a way that's authentic. The reason why I have these conclusions, guys, is I have a very scientific, logical relationship with God. And when I'm in a bad spot, God telling me like tomorrow's gonna be a better day, that doesn't satisfy me, because I'm not like one of these airy fairy like, okay, I can believe. I need to know the facts. Like, God, do I just need to boss up? Is this just the season I'm in? Tell me. And then tell me what the goal is here, because otherwise, like, I'm a very logical person. As I can't deal with people trying to say, like, oh, tomorrow's a better day. That doesn't work for me. I know it works for some people. It doesn't work for me. Tell me it real. And if tomorrow's a better day, Lord, then tell me. If it's not, what do I need to do? Or if I'm doing something wrong, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I need to do better. You know what I'm saying? I give God a chance and I humble myself before the Lord. That's how I got to here. And I acknowledge that I need him. to win in this universe that he created. This universe, the scientists are working so hard, spending 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, their whole life, to not even be right. To 30 years in, have one person make a discovery and they're completely wrong. All the work they've done was for nothing. I would rather be on YouTube. I would rather make these videos and nobody watch this. I would rather to be 100% honest with God, submit myself to him, which only has benefited me, guys. You guys don't even know the stuff that I've done, like, as a result of God, the way that God talks to me, the way I experience him on a spiritual level. I was thinking about this earlier because I was listening to a podcast of somebody, a well-known person, that I actually DM'd because this happened to me more than once, by the way, where I've had the like idea, or like I felt God telling me to say something to somebody well known, and I've said it to them, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed to hear right now. I was just thinking about this right now as you sent me this message. Like, well-known people, right? Because when you start to operate in the kingdom of heaven, there's laws of this universe and the laws of the world, they don't, the matrix, it doesn't exist anymore for you. You're in another thing. That's why people, I remember a couple of years ago, and I was struggling to find work after I decided to walk away from the entertainment industry because I didn't want to sell my soul to the devil and I wanted to spend time with the Lord. I was struggling to find work. Now, I don't even work to get work. People just call me, email me, text me, we need you for this. I'm living so much in what God, in hacking the matrix, that I don't even care. That's why I don't care what anybody has to say. I don't care if people say I'm too far-fetched. You can get all up in my comments and say, oh, you're off the rails. How dare you say this is the best video to watch on YouTube. The first thing I'll say is, what's your life look like? Because my life looks like, I'm going to sign off this video. I'm going to continue drinking my wine, eating my popcorn. I might take myself down to the park, listen to music, enjoy myself, right? After having done this, upload the video when I feel like, do what I gotta do when I need to. If the Lord says read the Bible, read the Bible. If the Lord says chill, chill. If the Lord says work, then work. Because I ain't got nothing to worry about, because the guy who created this universe, right, the man of total order, God himself, is who I'm in submission to. And I know this from a scientific perspective. Like, do you see what I'm saying? I'm enjoying life. That's why I purposely made sure to have some wine for this video. Because I can't wait to drink the Jesus' wine when I get to heaven, because I know I'm going there. I know it. I don't fear death. I don't fear death or disorder, because that has no power over Jesus, over God. I don't fear the government. I don't fear the evil of this world. I don't care, because if God wants me alive on this earth, I shall not die. I don't need to understand everything. I don't need to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You know why? Because I don't need to overcome this world somehow in an effort. Because the only reason we seek to understand obsessively is when we seek to understand so that we can become God. When Eve ate from the tree, and she ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she wants to put herself in God's place where we decide what's good and evil. And look where us deciding what's good and evil has got the world. We all have different versions. We all have different things that we think is a lie, isn't a lie, is this, is that, isn't that, whatever. It's all different. It will never work in the ways that we want it to, because it was never built that way, because this universe was built to be lived with God. And that's why true wisdom is to follow God and follow everything he says. And that's why Jesus was perfect, because he followed every single thing that God said for him to do, because he was born of God. Through a woman. Can you imagine? And so that's why I've got to say here, in the battle of God and science, God takes the cake every day. The fact that just for an airplane to fly in the sky, they have to mimic and find a way to build a machine that operates like the bird that God created, that lives naturally, that we don't even know if it thinks conscious or subconscious thoughts the same ways that we do. The fact that we do the same thing when it comes to boats and comparing them to ducks in order to move on the earth. The fact that we have to study how this universe, clearly it's been built in such a way, and God is laughing at us trying to work it out, because he's like, you don't need to do all that. Just trust me. Follow what I'm telling you to do, and it's going to work out. Receive my son, because the significance of receiving Jesus is acknowledging that he did what no man could do, which is to put everybody always before himself, which is to do everything right all the time, and to have the compassion to do it out of love, That love doesn't exist on this earth. Selfishness and pride exist, and selfishness and pride are birthed in the kingdom of darkness. And that's what I've got to say to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is my video, God versus science. God takes the cake, baby, because some of us are living in our winning season. It's hard for me to make a YouTube video because I'm living so well with God. I feel so powerful. I'm living in my Miles Morales. I feel fearless. I don't care. Nothing can take me out of this world because I have God and I receive Jesus. So even if they put me in prison, guess what? I'm going to be delivering people in prison. I'm going to be doing prayers of deliverance, and I'm going to be casting out demons, and I'm going to be preaching the name of Jesus. Because guess what? I will not die until the second, the moment, the minute, or the hour that God decided for me to leave this universe and be with him. That's all I gotta say, because if life's a game, then let's play to win. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know it got crazy, but I just decided that this video, I needed to make it because this whole science, blah, 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 I can do the science. If we want to do scientific, we can talk deeper about these scientific theories. But realistically, if you think about it logically, where did entropy start? The moment that man, us men and women, or rather women in this case, but men and women, thought we knew better than the moment we made ourselves gods above God, the moment we thought we could decipher between good and evil, the moment we think we knew what we were doing, was the beginning of our downfall. And all we're doing is just living in that cascade, in that domino effect. And that's the truth. That's the truth. That's what I gotta say, what I gotta say. So you guys have any thoughts in the comment section down below. If anybody made it to the end of this video, please tell me, because this is such a long video, but I just knew that I have to just make the video as I make the video, because I always overthink this stuff, because I think, oh my gosh, it's so long and you're a YouTuber and YouTubers should do this and you should edit it. But I just thought, I'm going to do this real, I'm going to do this raw. Whenever take I do that I choose to stick with is going to be the take that goes up as it is, how it is. Because, yeah, if it is the Lord's will, whoever is the Lord wills to see this video will see it, whoever he doesn't. And even if this video was just for me or just out of obedience to God on my part, it doesn't matter. God knows what he's doing. I trust God. God is the one who knows about the future. God created this universe. God created me. So the smartest thing to do, if you're in a game, think about it, guys. You know how I say life's a game. If you're playing a game, the best person to trust as to how to win the game is the person who created the game in the first place. Right? Not the people who are still trying to work out the game. AKA the scientists. Just saying. Just saying. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless every single one of you guys watching. Because if life's a game, let's play to win. Welcome to the winning team. It's so much fun over here. It's so much fun over here. We have fun over here on the winning team. We love it. So, God bless every single one of you. And I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.